My grandfather raised 4 children through the Depression on $11 a week. $11. For a whole family. For a whole week. And I'll tell you something, those kids never went to bed hungry. Not once. Because my grandmother knew things that most folks today were simply never taught. How to take almost nothing and turn it into a supper that filled you up and warmed the whole house. I've got 25 of those meals to show you today. The real ones. The ones people made when the cupboard was near empty and payday was still a week off. Number 4 on this list is the one my grandfather ate nearly every night for 3 years, and he always said it was his favorite. Number 11 costs less than $1.50 to make, even now. And number 9, well, that one's got a story I'll save for when we get there. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee and sit with me a while. If you like the old ways of doing things, go ahead and subscribe. I put a new one of these up every week. Let's count them down. 25 forgotten poor man meals that kept America alive. Number 25, tomato and bread soup. This was the meal that said, I've got almost nothing left and I'm still going to eat well tonight. Half a loaf of stale bread, a can of tomatoes, a clove of garlic, and some water. You tore the bread into rough chunks, dropped it in the pot, and let it simmer 20 minutes till the bread melted down into a thick, warm stew. A pinch of salt, a little oil if you had it. That was the whole thing. Folks in fancy restaurants call it by an Italian name now and charge $18 a bowl. My grandmother just called it supper. Number 24, potato and onion stew. 2 potatoes, 1 onion, a spoonful of bacon grease, water and salt. That was the whole recipe, and it's still one of the best things you'll ever put in a bowl. You slice the potatoes thin, let it all simmer till the potatoes broke apart and thickened the broth into something creamy without a drop of cream in it. That bacon grease gave it a smoky depth that made it taste far richer than any meal that cheap has a right to. Potatoes cost pennies, and onion keeps for weeks, and you could make the whole thing sitting down on a kitchen stool. Number 23, ham bone and bean soup. Now here's where our grandparents were smarter than all of us. When the ham was eaten down to the bone, most folks today would throw that bone out. Not them. That bone was the next 3 meals. Into the pot it went, with a bag of navy beans soaked overnight, an onion, a couple carrots, and water to cover. Then it simmered 3-4 hours, till the beans turned creamy and pulled every last bit of smoke out of that bone. By the end, you couldn't tell where the broth stopped and the beans began, thick enough to stand a spoon up in it. A bag of beans cost next to nothing. And that ham bone, already paid for with Sunday's dinner. That's not a recipe, friend. That's arithmetic. That's a mother who never wasted a single thing in her life. Number 22, cabbage and sausage pot. 1 head of cabbage, 2 or 3 smoked sausage links, a pot of water. That was the entire shopping list. Quarter the cabbage, slice the sausage into thick coins, simmer it together 45 minutes till the cabbage turned silky and sweet. A head of cabbage cost less than $1 and fed a person 3 days. And here's the part I love hardly any knife work. If your hands ache, you can tear the cabbage apart with your fingers and snap the sausage by hand. No strength required. Number 21, rice and canned chicken stew. When you couldn't get to the store, this is what you made from the pantry. A can of chicken, a cup of rice, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and some water. Everything in one pot, 20 minutes. And you had something that tasted like a chicken and rice casserole without half the work. The chicken's already cooked in the can, so no fuss, no raw meat to handle. Just open, dump, and stir. Country folks kept a pantry stocked like a bunker, and a meal like this waited on the shelf until the day you needed it. Number 20, poor man's chili. Not the fancy competition kind, the real kind. A pound of the cheapest ground beef, browned. A can of kidney beans. A can of tomatoes. Chili powder and salt. 30 minutes, And you had a pot of chili that lasted 3 days and tasted better on day 2 than it did on day 1. That was the beauty of it for somebody cooking for one. Make it Sunday night, eat Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You cook once and you're fed all week. There's a kind of peace in that. Number 19, egg drop soup. You didn't need a restaurant for this. You needed a pot of boiling broth, 2 eggs, and about 60 seconds. Bring the broth to a boil, beat 2 eggs in a cup, and pour them in slow while you stir. The eggs set into little golden ribbons floating through the broth. Salt, pepper, done. This was the one you made when you were tired, or under the weather, or just didn't have the appetite for much. Warm, gentle, easy. Less than $2, less than 5 minutes. Let me stop a minute and tell you something real. These aren't just recipes. They're what people made when they had nobody to lean on. I know a lot of you watching are cooking for one now. And there's a thing about that nobody ever talks about. The quiet of a kitchen that used to be full. Cutting a recipe in half because the person you used to cook for isn't at the table anymore. These one-pot meals solved more than hunger. They solved the hard days. The days when your knees ache and your back hurts and washing 3 pans feels like too much, and you think maybe you'll just skip supper. A meal like this is the difference between eating and not eating. And you're worth the trouble of a hot supper every single night. Don't let anybody, including yourself, tell you different. All right, let's keep going. Number 18, lentil and carrot stew. Here's number 18. The one I told you costs less than $1.50. A cup of lentils, 2 carrots, an onion, water. And lentils don't even need soaking. They cook down in 30 minutes into a thick, earthy stew that sticks to your ribs and keeps you full for hours. The carrots bring a little sweetness. The onion brings the depth. My grandmother wrote this one on an index card and tucked it into my mother's recipe box the day she got married. $1.50, a full belly, and a little piece of her handwriting that outlived them both. Number 17, corn chowder. A can of creamed corn, a can of whole kernel corn, 1 diced potato, a cup of milk. Simmer the potato till tender. Add both cans of corn and the milk and let it thicken into a golden, sweet, velvety soup. The creamed corn thickens itself, no fussing with flour, no lumps to worry about. Farm wives made this when the garden was done for the season and the canned goods were all that was left. Number 16, black-eyed pea stew. Down south, black-eyed peas weren't just for New Year's luck. They were a Wednesday night lifeline. A bag of peas simmered with a ham hock, an onion, and a can of tomatoes till it all melted together into something thick and smoky and a little tangy. The ham hock was the cheapest cut at the butcher, often less than $1 a pound, and it existed for one job, to make beans taste like a feast. Served over rice, one pot fed a person 4 or 5 days. That's not cooking, friend, that's engineering. Number 15, one pot beef and macaroni. A pound of ground beef, a box of elbow macaroni, a can of tomato sauce. 1 pot. Brown the beef, add the macaroni and sauce and enough water to cook the noodles right in the same pot. 15 minutes. Most families just called it goulash, though it had nothing to do with the Hungarian kind. It was American hard times food, wearing a borrowed name, and it kept millions of people fed without one word of complaint. Number 14, salmon patties in gravy. A can of salmon mashed with a cracker and an egg and a little onion, formed into patties and fried till golden. Then you scoot the patties aside, sprinkle a little flour into the pan, add milk, and stir up a gravy right there in the drippings. Everything back in, cover, 5 minutes. A can of salmon cost less than $2 and made 2 meals. Served over rice or a piece of bread that was a proper supper. My grandmother didn't know a thing about the science of it. She just knew it was cheap, it was good, and it held together in the pan. That was enough. Number 13, chicken and dumplings. Now this was the meal Southern grandmothers made when somebody was grieving or sick or just needed to feel loved. You couldn't afford a whole chicken most weeks, but the backs and necks and wings cost almost nothing. Simmer those bony parts with celery and onion till the meat falls off, pull the bones out, then drop spoonfuls of biscuit dough right into the broth. 20 minutes covered, and the dumplings puff up soft and pillowy. They carried this in covered pots to doorsteps all over the neighborhood. And every time you reheated a bowl, the kitchen smelled like somebody still cared enough to cook for you. That smell that's worth more than money. Number 12, split pea soup. A bag of split peas, a leftover ham bone, a carrot, water, nothing else. The peas dissolve into a thick green porridge after an hour, and that ham bone gives up every last bit of smoke it's got. So dense, you could near cut it with a knife. And it's about impossible to ruin. You can walk away from the stove, forget it 20 minutes, and it doesn't burn. It just gets thicker. That forgiveness mattered. Number 11, navy bean soup. If ham bone and bean soup was the Sunday version, navy bean soup was the workhorse. No bone needed, just a bag of navy beans, an onion, some celery, and salt simmered 2 hours, till the beans burst open and thicken the broth into a creamy white soup that tastes far richer than 4 ingredients ought to. Here's a fact for you. The U.S. Senate cafeteria has served navy bean soup every single day since 1903. It's on the menu right now. Why? Because it's cheap, it's filling, and every senator who ever grew up poor knows it as the taste of home. Here's what nobody says out loud. A lot of folks living alone skip meals, not because they forgot, not because they're not hungry, because cooking for one feels pointless. The table's too quiet, the portion's too small. It doesn't feel worth the effort when there's nobody across from you. That's exactly what these meals were the answer to. Not because they were exciting, because they were possible. You could make them tired, you could make them sad, you could make them with aching hands and a bad back. The most important ingredient in every single one of these wasn't the beans or the potatoes or the broth. It was the fact that somebody could actually make it. That's the whole secret. Not the flavor, not the fancy technique, just you can do this. Tonight, and you should. 5 to go, and I saved some of the best for last. Number 10, sausage and white bean stew. Smoked sausage in rounds, a can of white beans, a can of tomatoes, a handful of greens if you had them. One pot, 20 minutes. The sausage gives the smoke. The beans make it hearty. The tomatoes brighten it up. This was the one that actually looked like a real dinner in the bowl. And when you're starting to lose interest in eating a meal that looks like a meal, makes you feel like a person again, that matters more than any label on the side of a can. Number 9, tuna noodle pot. Here's number 9, the one I promised you a story about. A can of tuna, a handful of egg noodles, a can of cream of mushroom soup, some peas if you had them, one pot, 12 minutes, and the whole kitchen smelled like every Wednesday night from 1955 on. There was a widow, a neighbor of my grandmother's, who made her version of this every week, and she started crushing a handful of potato chips on top before she ate it. She said the crunch was the only thing that made it feel like a real dinner instead of just getting by. Well, the neighbors heard about it, and they started bringing her potato chips. Then they started bringing their own bowls. And before long, Tuesday supper at her house was the fullest table on the street, a one-pot meal that accidentally cured the loneliness of a whole neighborhood. That's what these meals really did. Number 8, potato soup. 5 potatoes, an onion, butter, milk, salt. That simple list carried more American families through hard times than near anything else. Simmer the potatoes soft. Mash some right in the pot to thicken it. Add a splash of milk and a pat of butter. 30 minutes, less than $2. And it's soft, no chewing. For folks with bad teeth who couldn't afford the dentist, this wasn't just convenient. It was the difference between a proper supper and giving up on food altogether. Number 7, Red beans and rice, a pound of red beans, a smoked sausage link, an onion, a green pepper, some celery, cooked low and slow in one pot, till the beans turn creamy, and the sausage gives up its soul to the broth, served over rice. This was the Monday meal of New Orleans, born from washing clothes all day while supper simmered on the back burner. And that's the beauty of it, unattended. Put it on at noon, come back at 5. No stirring, no standing. The beans do their own work, and it's so rich you forget you spent $3 on the whole pot. Louis Armstrong, the trumpet player, signed his letters, "Red beans and ricely yours." That wasn't a joke. That was a man who never forgot where his food came from. Number 6. Depression stew. Ground beef browned in a pot, a can of tomatoes, a can of corn, 2 diced potatoes, water, salt, pepper. That's it. The potatoes thicken the broth as they cook. The corn brings sweetness. The beef holds you till morning. This one showed up in Depression cookbooks with no name at all, just stew. Housewives penciled it into the margins. Mothers passed it to daughters like a secret. It was the recipe that said, no matter how bad things get, you can eat tonight. One pot lasted 4 days and cost less than $5. Number 5. Pinto beans and cornbread. A bag of pinto beans, cooked low 3 hours, with a little salt pork, till the broth turns thick and brown. And cornbread golden and crackling, baked in a cast-iron skillet seasoned by 60 years of use, then broken into chunks to soak up the bean liquor. For families across the rural South and the plains, this wasn't a meal. It was the meal. Pinto beans were the cheapest protein in the store, and they still are. Keep a bag of pintos and a box of cornmeal in the cupboard, and you will never go hungry. Ever. Number 4. Chicken thigh and rice pot. And here it is, number 4. The one my grandfather ate nearly every night for 3 years, and swore was his favorite meal on earth. Chicken thighs were the forgotten cut. For years, they cost half the price of breasts, because everybody was convinced white meat was better. My grandfather knew better. He bought thighs for pennies and made a meal twice as rich. Brown the thighs in a pot, add a cup of rice, some broth, whatever seasonings in the cabinet. Cover it 30 minutes. The rice drinks up every drop of that chicken-flavored broth, and the thighs fall apart at the touch of a fork. He'd make it in the same pot every night, same meal, over and over. And I asked him once, didn't he get tired of it? He said, "Son, when a thing is good and it's honest and it keeps you standing on your own 2 feet, you don't get tired of it. You get grateful for it." I think about that every time I cook. Number 3. Cabbage roll skillet. All the comfort of a stuffed cabbage roll, none of the fuss. Brown a little ground beef, add chopped cabbage, a cup of rice, a can of tomatoes, and water. Cover and simmer till the rice is done and the cabbage goes tender. One skillet, no rolling, no stuffing, no fuss, just everything a cabbage roll gives you, in a fraction of the work and the cost. Number 2. Vegetable beef soup. This was the clean-out-the-icebox meal every resourceful cook knew by heart. Celery going limp, carrots getting soft, half an onion, a potato starting to sprout. Brown a little stew meat, then everything into the pot with a can of tomatoes and water. Simmer an hour till the windows fog up. Every bowl was a little different. Every batch used up what was there. And that meant no 2 nights ever tasted quite the same, which, when you're eating alone, is a small mercy. It kept things interesting. It kept a person going. Number 1. Chicken soup. And number 1. Of course, it's number 1. A whole chicken in a pot of water with carrots, celery, onion, and salt. Simmered 2 hours till the whole house smells like somebody's grandmother lives there. The broth turns gold. The chicken falls apart. The vegetables soften into the most nourishing, comforting meal human beings ever came up with. Every culture has a version. Every generation passes it down. For somebody living alone, a pot of chicken soup is more than supper. It's a connection to every person who ever made it for you. Every sick day, every cold winter, every hard week. It was the taste of being taken care of. And here's the thing, when you make it for yourself, alone, in a quiet kitchen, with nobody to share it, it still works. The steam still rises, the broth still warms you, and somewhere in the smell of it, you remember that you are worth the trouble of cooking for. So here's my challenge to you. Make one of these this week, just one. The potato soup, the lentil stew, my grandfather's chicken and rice. And when you do sit down at the table, not the couch, set yourself a place. Eat it slow. Because these meals were never really about being cheap. They were about staying alive and staying human when the world made it awful easy to stop trying. Tell me down in the comments which one you're going to make. I want to know if the Depression stew gets more love than the pinto beans. And if your grandmother had one of these she made, tell me about her. I read every one. These aren't just recipes, friends. They're proof that the simplest food made in one pot, eaten alone, can still be an act of dignity. I'm Earl. I'll see you next week.